The shadows creep as twilight fades away. The shadows be darling and take a light of day. In the silence of the night, darkness breathes, all so tight. Christmas home, through the haunted street they stray.
It goes by many names. The Grand Grimoire, Red Dragon, those are two. But the real one, the one that matters, the name everyone knows, the Book of the Devil. The book went by many names in the same way that the devil goes by many names, and now it was being handed to me by my sergeant, in a room with 2 dead bodies, whose limbs had been cut off and reshaped to form a pentagram. This was my job. This was my Monday. Figure out the who and the why of a gruesome double homicide with no leads or evidence. The last time there were murders directly tied to worshiping the devil was the Night Stalker. His real name was Richard Ramirez, born in 1960, El Paso, Texas. He was the 5th of 13 children in a poor family. His father was a laborer, and his mother worked at a boot factory. He had a troubled childhood. His father was reportedly abusive, and Ramirez experienced a series of traumatic events, including being exposed to violence and drug use from a young age. He was also influenced by his older cousin, who showed him disturbing images and stories related to violence and Satanism. His criminal behavior began with petty theft and burglary in his teens. He was also arrested for possession of marijuana and other minor offenses. His most notorious crime started in 1984 during his mid-20s. His modus operandi involved breaking into homes, often at night, where he would assault, rob, and kill his victims. He targeted both men and women using extreme violence, marked by brutality, including sexual assaults and tortures. His crimes spanned various cities, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, and the surrounding areas. Luckily, it was relatively short-lived. His reign of terror lasted from 1984 to 1985 before his capture. That was almost 30 years ago, in California. Now it's 2013, and I'm standing inside a tiny one-bedroom home in the middle of nowhere in backwoods Louisiana. St. John the Baptist Parish, to be specific, located to the west of New Orleans. It has a mix of suburban and rural settings with access to natural spots and a more laid-back vibe compared to the city. There were 157 homicides in New Orleans last year. We were on pace to have even more this year. I wish I could say that this was the worst I had ever seen, but it wasn't. There's nothing worse than a homicide involving children. This was gruesome, but at least they were both adults. I can stomach that. You need an iron stomach in this business. Eleuthera, black female, mid-20s. Brandon, white male, late 20s. Their limbs had been mixed and matched to form the pentagram. There was no blood outside of the tiny living room where they were being displayed. The house was old. The walls and counters were covered with old voodoo artifacts. Voodoo was a form of therapy and religion for poor people in New Orleans way back when. They could be seen as a doctor, priest, and governor all in one, as was the woman whom this house once belonged to. She was clearly involved in the practice of voodoo. She was, in fact, a voodoo queen, highly respected in her community. Most of the people who came to her were runaway slaves, so she gave them special charms, amulets, keys, representations to help them escape their captors, symbols of hope. Voodoo queens had to evoke protection from Jehovah and Jesus so that local Catholics wouldn't protest and hang them for witchcraft. To her patients, she was a saint. To her opposition, she was the devil. In the spring of last year, almost 8 years ago, she passed away. Inside her home, while sleeping. Decades of public service and sacrifice. After all that she had done to help, she didn't even get an obituary in the papers. The murderer took their time. The incisions were precise, meticulous, thinly sliced like deli meat. There were no neighbors to interview because there were no neighbors. This tiny house was completely isolated from the surrounding town. There was a large former plantation field behind it with a long dirt road through the woods leading towards the entrance. There was no murder weapon on site. Beyond the bodies, everything in the house was spotless. The 2 cadavers were from Boston. She was the granddaughter of the former estate owner. He was her boyfriend. Clean records across the board. No history of domestic violence or drug use. Quite the opposite. He was a high school teacher, involved in his local community. Very outspoken liberal. She was an aspiring musician who went to school for sociology. They had their whole lives in front of them. Sergeant had to make the call to notify the family. You can imagine the response. Beyond your worst nightmare. Her family could not be reached. Her mother had long since passed away. Her father was MIA, no siblings. The closest family member she had was the woman who used to own the house, her grandmother. There were pictures of her as a child displayed throughout the home. Just her and the grandmother. None with the father. Nobody we spoke to could confirm that they had seen the couple. The town was a 4-mile drive from the house. It was an isolated existence. We got conflicting reports from townsfolk about where we might find the father. Drastically different reports. Some said he worked in the alligator pit. He didn't. Another said he worked at the Baptist church. He didn't. Another said he moved to Morocco. Great. But the locals all knew about the Voodoo Queen. They revered her. Said that her land was a holy place, which is why it deserved to be separated from everyone else. One man we met at the gas station claimed that the Voodoo Queen had given him his sight back. We were working loosely in conjunction with the Boston Police Department. They went for an in-person discussion with Brandon's family. By all accounts, they were a very happy couple. His family had grown to really care about Eleuthera. They envisioned them getting married. He told us that they had come here to clean up this tiny house and prepare to sell it. The estate was left to Eleuthera by her grandmother, the Voodoo Queen. One woman who worked at the butcher shop condemned us for even going to that house without permission. She screamed that it didn't belong to us. They had driven from Boston approximately 13 days ago. Typically in these situations, you try to find someone with a motive. This was proven to be the opposite. The utmost respect for the grandmother. Zero contacts to the granddaughter and her boyfriend. Exceptional craftsmanship with the murder weapon. Clear lineage to a workshop of Satan and his practicing. The time for murder is never good, but only 3 days prior I had made a promise to my 5-year-old girl that I'd spend less time working and more time being home. It was brought to my attention by my ex, who said my daughter could use another parent in her life, like her daddy. That stung, because it was true. My dad was not in my life. I'm glad he wasn't, but I was not him. I would not repeat his mistakes. So I promised my girl I'd be there, and now I was here. Damn it. The Night Stalker had a calling card. He often invoked satanic symbols and rituals during his crimes. He was known for leaving pentagram drawings at the scene and for his claims of worship in Satan. That garnered significant media attention and contributed to the widespread fear of satanic cults during that period. It was slowly sweeping across the country, even though in the grand scheme of things it was such a minimal threat. 40,000 people died of car accidents that year, but car safety didn't sweep the country. It didn't even make a dent. I know because my little sister died in a car accident. But one lunatic kills a dozen people and all of a sudden it's the end of the world. In August of 1985, he was finally captured by a group of Los Angeles residents who recognized him from a wanted poster. They detained him until the police arrived. Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was tried and convicted in 1989 for 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. He was sentenced to death. During his trial, he continued to display his interest in Satanism, often smirking and making devil's horns gestures. Ramirez has spent over 2 decades on death row at San Quentin State Prison in California. What kind of world are we living in where he's still alive? A dark one. Sadly, I had some reading to do. The Book of the Devil.
Carved in the midnight shadows, wandering through the blue, your name's a distant echo in the far where we both blew. You're like a ghost in the bayou, haunting me with every clue.
Nobody knows for sure when it was written. Different editions date the book to 1521, 1522, or 1421, but it was probably the early 19th century. The 19th century French occultist Eliphas Lévy believed that the contemporary edition of Le Dragon Rouge to be a counterfeit of the true, older Grand Grimoire. The introductory chapter was authored by someone named Antonio Venetiana del Rabina, who supposedly gathered this information from original writings of King Solomon. Most of it comes from the Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon. It's divided into 2 books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is further divided into 2 parts, the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets of the Magic Art of the Grand Grimoire. The Sanctum Regnum contains instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required in Book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contain simpler spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual in the first book. Some editions contain a short text between these 2 parts, the magic secret or the grand art of being able to speak with the dead. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact. It also details spells for winning the lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, making oneself invisible, etc. It recommends the magician have a bloodstone in their pocket while working the rituals. There's also a hierarchy of hell, because of course there is. Lucifer, Emperor, Beelzebub, Prince, Astaroth, Grand Duke, Lucifuge Raphael, Prime Minister, Satanakia, Commander-in-Chief, Agaliarept, Commandant, Fleurite, Lieutenant General, Sargatanus, Major, Neberos, Marshal and Inspector General. It was now midnight, and I was reading this crap with a glass of scotch that I'd been saving for some kind of celebration. Instead, I was using it to water down hellish dribble. I hadn't even seen if the Saints had won that night, and I'd bet 50 for them to cover the spread. The book reads like a vague and yet overly meticulous manual for summoning spirits, in this case, of the malicious kind. Some things within this first book struck me as bizarre and somewhat funny. On page 8, to not be harmed by the spirits you're summoning, wrap up gold or silver coins in paper and throw them at the spirit. Great strategy, bozo. Go for it. And then, on page 14, when a spirit acknowledges it knows where treasure is, you are to follow it alone to the treasure. Yeah, no. And on page 15, the entryway to the treasure may be guarded by what looks like a large dog with a bright collar, but twist, it's a gnome. Yes, really, a gnome. The second book is composed of listing other spirits, pacts, and other spells. For example, going to a graveyard is an act of trying to speak with the dead, or boiling a cat alive to go invisible. Boiling a cat? By no means was I a cat guy. I preferred dogs, but boiling one? No. The Grand Grimoire. According to legend, it was written by an apocryphal figure by the name of Honorius of Thebes, who is claimed to have been possessed by Satan himself. This is what a book about the book said. I was now shifting between a book written by the devil and a book explaining the book written by the devil. I had one of my deputies fetch me some Cliff Notes version I could shift towards, 'cause all this voodoo nonsense was starting to give me a headache, and I can't flush it all away with a nice glass of Glenlivet. During the 18th century, there was a cheap grimoire boom in France. A version of the Grand Grimoire was produced and then published in the following century. The original Grand Grimoire is said to be kept today in the Vatican secret archives and is not currently available to the public. Thanks, Vatican. Holier than thou, my ass. While the exact origin of the word grimoire is still being debated, it is generally accepted today that it is derived from the old French word grammaire. This word, which means grammar, is used as a reference to books in general, especially those that were written in Latin. Over time, the meaning evolved and eventually became associated with the occult. Now it's the word grimoire, which is the name given to the textbooks used in the occult. The contents of these books normally provide its user with instructions for the creation of magical amulets and talismans, instructions for the casting of magic spells, and even rituals for the summoning of supernatural beings such as angels and demons. Yada, yada, yada. There's basically 5 parts to the whole thing. 1. Invocation of demons. 2. Pacts with the devil. 3. Magical rituals and spells. 4. Protection from demons. 5. Occult symbols and language. Terrific. Now if you could just give me the damn clue as to who killed that couple.
Under your you running in my soul, something I've been doing, and I feel that the song goes, they're gonna take me to the old man. All the shadows, speaks and whispers, now they linger out you tonight. Well, the moon that speaks and invites, and the spirits start to rise, so cold on the home. Drowning in a darkened tomb, 1 shift deep blue, shadows and crescent moon.
We found her dad. That was the text I got when I woke up from my partner, Detective Wilkins. Wilkins was the polar opposite of me, which made us a good team. She was happily married, religious, sober, loved The Sopranos. I was none of those things. We got an anonymous tip that the dad was now working under a different name as a forest technician at the Atchafalaya Basin. It's the largest swamp in the United States. 1.4 million acres. Great place to get lost. It was an hour-and-a-half drive from New Orleans. Wilkins drove after I complained that I was up all night reading that damn book. Literal damn book. Wilkins was planning a birthday for her kid and was stressing that all the ducks were in a row. I sympathized and gave some war stories about the first couple of birthdays for my own kid, mingling with parents, making small talk, forced friendships, coordinating soccer pickups, nothing having to do with my kid, all having to do with being social towards people I had nothing in common with. How was your day? Great. I arrested a junkie who microwaved their cat because they were on heroin. Want more cake? Wilkins laughed at my curmudgeon attitude and then told me I needed to get laid. Well, we're heading to the swamp. What better place to bust out of a slump? The anonymous tip was from an older woman named Lucinda. Remember the man who said the voodoo queen had cured his blindness? Apparently he had gotten word to Lucinda that something might have happened to the granddaughter, and this was enough for Lucinda to give us a call. She ran a small bait and tackle store nearby. We said we had to meet her to verify her credibility. That, and we had no other leads to work on. We were stuck between rocks. We walked inside her store, which was about the size of my apartment, a.k.a. small. Alimony payments are real, and not cheap. Lucinda had a hard time standing. She was north of 80 and had a long history of chronic inflammation. She had known the father for quite some time. She'd even met the granddaughter way back when. At first, she found the father to be charming, a family man, a religious man. But over time, he seemed to lose his way, and the past year or so, he seemed to be living a solitary life. Wilkins asked Lucinda if she thought the father was capable of violence. No, Lucinda said, but he believes in the dark magic. She had once caught him trying to invoke spirits. After that, they never spoke again. I had to ask, "What about you, Lucinda? Do you believe in the dark magic?" She looked at me. No, it was more like she looked through me and said, "You seen them bodies? You seen what that girl now looks like? You think that's from this world?" Nobody had seen the bodies. We had kept the story underground, locally. In Boston, it was a dominant headline. Brandon and Eleuthera had been murdered. It was all anyone could talk about up there. This clean, pristine couple killed after leaving the friendly confines of Boston, which does not have a great history of racial harmony, let's be honest. But this would just be another black eye on New Orleans. We were getting used to getting beat up around here. Just a place for yuppies to dip their toes in, have a couple of drinks, and then go back to their pearly gates. That was the reaction in Boston. We're a zoo being run by savages. In New Orleans, not a peep. That's the difference in news coverage depending on who gets popped and where they got hit. Lucinda, like everyone else, had not seen the bodies. So what was she referring to? "I seen them. I seen them in my nightmares. To bring life, you must also bring death. Sometimes the spirit can get lost between the two worlds. It would be naive to think we are in control of a world that we do not understand. Don't you agree, officers?" My Lucinda impersonation was pretty spot on, but Wilkins didn't even seem to notice because she was too busy reading. That's why I was now driving, so Wilkins could keep reading that flaccid comic book known as the Devil's Book, occasionally out loud. I felt hungover, even though I hadn't drank last night. Well, 2 drinks. 3? Maybe 3. 4 if we're counting the beer at the burger spot on my way home. I told Wilkins to stop reading that crap. It's all mumbo-jumbo. Wilkins wasn't hearing me. She just kept reading. I turned on some music to lighten the mood while singing as Lucinda.
Of fire where the truth gets lost at night. Hear the whispers in the stillness, feel the chill that starts to bite. Haunted eyes behind the curtain, watching stories that unfold. The heart eludes the end, where the secrets stay untold. Darkness on the highway with the moonlight shining thin. Echoes in the silence, ain't no saint but house and sin.
Frog Legs was a bar on the outskirts of the outskirts. Everything inside looked like it was about to disintegrate if you touched it. I opened the door and saw the patrons. 5 at most. They had almost reptilian skin. That's what working outside New Orleans your whole life will do to you. It's funny how we become surroundings. Same thing happened to my father. He spent his whole life chasing monsters, and then he eventually became one. A man with one eye came up towards us from behind the bar. We asked if he had seen this man, holding up a picture of the father. Before he could even respond, Wilkins tapped my elbow. Daddy-O was sitting in the corner. We walked up to his tiny table in the tiny corner of this tiny bar and showed our ID. Wilkins took the lead. She usually did. She was more welcoming. People opened up to her in a way they did not to me. Our good cop, bad cop routine worked well. Why fix it if it ain't broke? "Lewis, I'm Detective Wilkins. This is Detective Dorn. We'd like to talk with you in private for a moment. It's regarding your daughter. Can we speak outside?" Lewis was not moving. A fly was buzzing around his face and he didn't even flinch. Wilkins took one step closer. She repeated herself. "Lewis, I'm Detective Wilkins. This is Detective Dorn. We'd like to talk with you in private for a moment outside. It's regarding your daughter. Can we speak outside?" Lewis finally budged. He took his half glass of something brown and finished it in one motion. He seemed to savor it, letting the taste wallow in his mouth while he kept his eyes closed. Taking a deep breath, he opened his eyes, smiled. With half his teeth missing, he said, "This world no longer yours." Then he took out a high-point C9 semi-automatic pistol and blew his brains out all over the floor. A small crowd was beginning to form. We kept the murderers underground because we didn't want to create a panic. God forbid a story leaks that's connected to the devil. Talk about going viral. Luckily, everyone who was loitering outside the bar was north of 70 and didn't have a phone. This was a poor town, even by the standards of New Orleans, rich in history. Only. Wilkins still had blood on her shirt. She started to try and scrub it out, but then she just stopped and took it off, tossing it into a nearby garbage can, and then she let her suit jacket hang above her tank top while I instructed the local deputies on site to speak with everyone loitering. Every single citizen standing around here, everything they can tell us about Lewis. Now. They scattered as I walked back over to a very shook-up Wilkins. I asked if she wanted something. She looked pale. "What do you think he meant?" "Nothing," I told her. "He was delusional. Clearly. You'd have to be to do that to your own daughter. I mean, can you imagine how rotten your brain has to be in order to—" I stopped myself. Just saying the first couple of words was making my blood boil. I was getting hot. When I get hot, I tend to act out, and I could feel it coming. I needed a drink. I asked Wilkins if she wanted a drink. I was so worked up I forgot Wilkins was sober. "What do you think he meant?" "I just told you," I said. "Case closed. Then file the interviews, and then we can shut it once we get back to the station." I asked her again if she wanted a drink, still forgetting she was sober. My head felt like it was about to pop off like a champagne cork. I told her she looked like she could use one. She didn't respond. She was shook. I can't blame her. I don't know why it wasn't hitting me like it her. Maybe because deep down I'm glad he did it. No, it wasn't deep down. It was right on the surface. Any sick monster like that who would chop up his own daughter should not be alive. Simple. So, yeah, I'm glad his brains are now on that filthy floor. I was secretly filling up my flask behind the bar as forensics walked around the body for evidence and photographs. The highest brand they had was Jameson. That was just fine by me. Me and James had gone way back, and I was happy to hang out with him again for an early afternoon taste. I let it wallow in my mouth for a moment, just long enough that I could take the taste with me when I left the bar again and that gnarling sun beat me down. I asked Wilkins if she could drive. She snapped out of it a bit and nodded, getting into the car as I snuck in one more swig of the warm James. The deputies had all begun interviewing locals. Caution tape surrounded the narrow entryway to Frog's Legs. 3 bodies in 36 hours. This was my Tuesday. She wasn't buying what I was selling. This is what happens when you work with the polar opposite. You see it from every angle. To me, it was open and shut. To Wilkins, it was just open. Why else would he kill himself as soon as we showed up? He knew we had him, and he didn't want to go away. Or, Wilkins said, maybe it's 'cause he couldn't protect her. I wanted to have a comeback, some kind of retort, but that hit me with 1,000 bricks. Any father, especially of a daughter, a young daughter, can't help but let that thought rip out your guts. Just the very notion of not being able to protect your kid, there's nothing worse. Nothing. We hit traffic. It was raining. Hard. The drive should have been 2 hours. It ended up being 4. It gave us extra time to talk it all out. Well, it gave her time to talk it all out. It gave me time to listen. Something that, if you spoke to my ex-wife, she would tell you was not one of my more refined qualities. I tend to only hear what I wanted to hear and spoke so I could speak, instead of speaking so I could talk. I think that's what she said. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. Wilkins was clearly frazzled, so I was trying to play zone defense instead of man-to-man. I didn't want to press her if she wasn't thinking clearly. A night's rest and some quality time with her family would make her see the day. For now, I would have let her say things like, "You have to wonder why someone would want to invoke spirits. The loneliness, the pain that you must have felt in your life to reach such depths of despair, to feel so alone that your only path towards the light was to dig deeper into the dark." I didn't even respond to that one. I just put on my sunglasses and turned up the radio. The park never seemed nicer. My daughter was playing on the swings while I hung back to keep a watchful eye as she made her way in and around the playground. Occasionally I would let my eyes drift down to my phone so I can keep another watchful eye on the Saints game. They were down 21-7, and I was cursing way under my breath because I picked the over. All in all, things were looking up. 2 days ago, on June 7, 2013, the Night Stalker, Richie Ramirez, died of complications related to B-cell lymphoma at the age of 53. This is the world we live in. This is the world my daughter lives in. He kills 13 people and then spends the next 20 years on death row? He got to go out on his own dime. Where's the justice on that? Why couldn't I see his brains getting blown out across the filthy floor of Frog's Legs Bar? Because our world spins on its own axis. We keep fooling ourselves that we can control it. We just hold on and hope we don't spin off. This is why I need to enjoy these moments with my daughter in the park, where I would take her on weekends. That was my time with her. Not only was the park nice, but there was a great pizza place we could walk to afterward. Why fix it? She would stop sometimes as she ran around to wave and smile, and I'd spring my hand up quickly to reciprocate the feeling. As much as I tried, I couldn't help but think about how Lewis must have had similar moments with his daughter when she was my kid's age. My sweet little Lucy. Finally, a day of rest. And then I got the text from Wilkins. That wasn't her father. You gotta be freaking kidding me. I'd spent the last 6 days knee-deep in paperwork trying to spell out the most obvious double homicide of my career and now was about to become obsolete? It was done, over, wrapped in a neat little bow, and now this? God damn it! This was my Sunday.
Whispers in the bayou breeze, swaying to that sweet tease. We dance neath the moonlight, set our souls alight. Loving like a river flowing, never knowing, always growing. You bring that ease through the night, you're just right. Play our song on a dusty road, hearts unfold. In this town, our loves are gold. Keep the groove.